Welcome to GT with Jen and Casey. My name is Casey Higdon. I'm the elementary GT specialist here at Humble ISD.
And I'm Jennifer Williams. I'm the advanced learning coordinator for all of our advanced students and GT students here in Humble ISD. And we are super excited about this series that we're starting with parents about the emotional side of giftedness. So, Casey, can you tell us just a little bit of where we got this idea from?
Yeah, so we collect a lot of feedback through our D2 programming, and we heard from parents that, they said, we're seeing all these behaviors at home. Our kids have big feelings. Maybe they're not seeing it in their friends' kids or, things like that. Or they have more than one kiddo and it's just only exhibited through their GT student. And so they're really, they've reached out and they said, we need help with this. How do we deal with these behaviors? Where are they stemming from? How can I support my child?
Great. And so that's really what we want to do. This is just our introductory video for this series, but there'll be more to come, and we're really excited about it. So we're going to jump right in. All right, so today we're going to talk about just increasing that understanding of where these big emotions come from, because like we said, if you aren't used to GT kids and all of a sudden you've got this new one in the mix, sometimes it's just different than what you're used to. And then the other part of it is we want to make sure that we learn how to manage those emotional outbursts, those behaviors that we don't want. We know we can't get rid of them completely, but we can address how often they happen, how long they last, and even just if we can tone down some of the intensity. And the last part of that is helping us as adults to gain our own emotional intelligence so we can model that behavior and teach that to our kids at a younger age and hopefully make it better all the way around. But in the middle of this, there's some things that we want to make sure we don't want to do. Casey, can you tell us just a little bit about what that is?
Absolutely. So I know that as a parent, and I think, Jen, you can probably relate to this too, when our child exhibits those behaviors, it's almost like a feeling of defeat, right? Like, what did we do wrong as a parent? What could we have done ahead of time to maybe like mitigate the situation or the behavior? And so the one thing that we don't want to do is we don't want to give up or feel like, okay, this is something I don't know how to handle, and just, not ever address the behaviors with your child or address the feelings, because I feel like that can be like very critical for a child. And we definitely don't want to be teaching our kids to not have feelings, right? Like, we have feelings as adults. Our kids have feelings, and those are just things that we have to figure out. How do we regulate those emotions?
Yeah, and I think the biggest part of it is there are so many tools around us that we don't even think about, and some of that is just the movies and the videos that our kids already like or the books that they read. And so one experience that I think really shows us that one movie is the Inside Out movies.
Yes.
And with that, we get to see a look kind of what's going on inside everyone's head, and it helps us understand. So in this clip that we're about to watch is Riley is telling her parents, or kind of being asked about her first day of school. And what we're going to see is how we get to those big emotions.
Weird. Why is she acting so weird?
What do you expect? All the islands are down.
Joy would know what to do.
That's it. Until she gets back, we just do what Joy would do.
Great idea. Anger, fear, disgust. How are we supposed to be happy?
Hey, Riley, I've got good news. I found a junior hockey league right here in San Francisco, and get this, tryouts are tomorrow after school. What luck, right?
Hockey.
Uh-oh, what do we do?
Guys, here, you pretend to be Joy.
Won't it be great to be back out on the ice?
Oh yeah, that sounds fantastic.
What was that? That wasn't anything like Joy.
Because I'm not Joy?
Yeah, no kidding.
Did you guys pick up on that?
Sure did.
Something's wrong.
Should we ask her?
Let's probe, but keep it subtle so she doesn't notice. So, how was the first day of school?
She's probing us.
I'm done. You pretend to be Joy.
What? Okay.
It was fine, I guess. I don't know. Oh, very smooth. That was just like Joy.
Something is definitely going on.
She's never acted like this before. What should we do? We're gonna find out what's happening, but we'll need support. Signal the husband. Ahem.
With a nice pass over the reed, comes across that right.
Uh-oh, she's looking at us. What did she say?
Well,
Oh, sorry, sir. No one was listening.
Is it garbage night? We left the toilet seat up. What? What is it, woman? What?
He's making that stupid face again.
I could strangle him right now.
Signal him again.
Ah, so, Riley, how was school?
Gotta be kidding me.
For this, we gave up that Brazilian helicopter pilot?
Boo, I'll be joy.
School was great, all right?
Riley, is everything okay?
Sir, she just rolled her eyes at us.
What is her deal? All right, make a show of force. I don't want to have to put the foot down.
No, not the foot.
Riley, I do not like this new attitude.
Oh, I'll show you attitude. No. Stay happy.
What is your problem? Just leave me alone.
Sir, reporting high levels of sass.
Take it to DEFCON 2.
You heard that, gentlemen? DEFCON 2.
Listen, young lady, I don't know where this disrespectful attitude came from.
You want a piece of this, Pops? Come and get it.
Yeah, well,
Here it comes. Prepare the foot.
Keys to safety position. Ready to launch on your command, sir.
just shut up!
Fire!
That's it. Go to your room.
So Jen, as I was listening to that video clip, there was a couple of things that really resonated with me. First of all the feelings that Riley felt just in that short amount of time, right? And the back and forth, because those are a lot of feelings to keep up with. Mm-hmm. But also too, the dad's response to Riley's outburst and Riley's, the language that she used, her attitude towards him, and then how he used those feelings, right? So it wasn't necessarily just about Riley and all the things that she was experiencing, but it was also too about the dad, the feelings he had, and then how he responded to Riley's feelings.
I agree. I think one of the things that we'll see as we go through this series is that there's kind of a normal response, as much as possible.
Right.
How the regular brain acts when it's approached with an uncomfortable situation or a stressful situation, as opposed to a GT student. So let's talk about that just a little bit. As I was saying, the average person's brain, according to research, tells us that we really kind of follow the process of, we have something we have to deal with, so we're going to plan it. And we're going to think about, just what the best approach is going to be. And then we act and we check and say, did this have really the outcome I wanted it to have? And if not, then we can act and make some decisions. But the problem comes in what we saw with Riley is that a GT kid's brain works a little bit differently. Sometimes the term neurodivergent is used a lot, and it just means that for a gifted person, our brains work just a little differently.
Right.
And so it looks more like this. And it's this jumbled pathway, and there's all these options at one time of, am I going to be happy, am I going to be sad, or am I going to be afraid? And they just grab onto the first emotion of whatever's emotional, whatever is convenient, whether it's rational or not.
Right.
And so we saw that with Riley. One of the things we saw were all of these different emotions. And really trying to figure out, am I sad, or am I disgusted, or sarcastic, fearful, those kind of things. But we did see one emotion clearly take the lead, and whether it was rational or not, we really don't know what Riley was struggling with, but anger kind of reared its ugly head.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that, Casey?
So, Jen, as I'm thinking about this and just the things that you've already said, when I look back at that other diagram of a GT student's brain, I want parents to understand that it's not a bad thing, right?
No.
Like, just because maybe your child's brain looks like that jumbled ball of yarn is kind of what resonates with me. It's not bad. It's just we have to figure out how do we deal with that, right? Because they're not working in that sequential order of acting, doing, checking, or planning for. Like you said, they're just trying to grab on. And so I think that was really what we saw with Riley. There was so much going on there. We don't really know what the root of the problem was. But again, a lot of that, she acted in anger, but then also the dad's response was also in anger too.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things is for us to change the way we respond to those outbursts, we have to understand where they're coming from and why their brain works that way. And I heard this really great analogy of the difference between a wizard brain and a lizard brain. So I want to tell you just a little bit about that.
Okay.
So our brain works kind of with two levels. We have this logical side of us, and it's the problem solver, and we're super calm, and we have logical reasoning. And most of us kind of operate in this wizard brain all the time, right?
Right.
But the problem comes is that we also have this kind of flip side of us. And basically what this is referred to as our lizard brain. This is that fight or flight. And actually, Casey, one of the things that I've just recently heard is changing that to say sometimes we don't fight or flight. We just freeze in the moment. And we saw a little bit of that in Riley. But this is where we are illogical. And we just don't make the most sense, you know, and you could hear that in some of the emotions. They're like, where is this coming from? This is not normal for Riley. And so I think that's important. One of the things that happens is when kids get overwhelmed by all the emotions at once or everything that's going on, they immediately switch into that lizard brain. And so one of the things is we really expect them to be logical.
Right.
And they honestly can't. So what we've got to figure out what to do is how to switch them back into that wizard brain moment and to get them to thinking and expressing things logically, which is kind of hard, you know?
Yeah, and one thing I think of too is that as adults, just as, you know, moms and dads at home, they've had those experiences in life that have taught them like how to deal with those emotions and all those things. So they probably have more of that wizard brain because they've been through enough to really understand how do I cope with all of these feelings, right? We have to think about, you know, some of our GT kids are identified at an age of, it could be 7, 8 years old. And so they just have not had those experiences to really figure out, okay, how do I deal with all of these emotions? And that's really what, you know, I know as teachers, they're trying, you know, they're teaching in class, okay, how do I deal with those emotions? And we have to, as parents, be able to support that at home.
And you know, you said something that I think is really important to kind of key in on, and that is that some of these kids are identified really early. They may be 7, but they may be reading on an 8th or 9th, 10th, even college level.
Right.
And so sometimes we have these expectations.
Absolutely.
And we call this asynchronous development. It's a big word for meaning that their social, emotional intelligence isn't quite at the same academic level. And so sometimes we put unrealistic expectations. And we got to remind ourselves, like, this is still a 7-year-old and I'm 48. And sometimes I have a hard time regulating my emotions when I get super stressed or super frustrated.
Right.
So the hard part about it is it's super frustrating in the moment. Like, we all get into those moments, and when our kid's acting out or when they're acting in a way that isn't normal or different, it's super frustrating. So let's talk about how we deal with that.
Jen, I chuckle every time whenever I read this. And it says, never in the history of calm down has anyone calmed down by being told to calm down, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
And I am sure that any adult that hears that phrase or reads that can probably think about a time that they are amped up about something, right? They're feeling these emotions or something going on that has just really kind of driven them to the next level, and they are being told to calm down and saying, hey, Jen, just calm down. Or, hey, Casey, just calm down. Has that really ever calmed anybody down?
Not really, because basically what, I don't know about you, but for me, it's like someone's telling me how to feel.
Right.
And I'm like, no, I'm frustrated, or no, I'm mad. And so we have to remind ourselves that sometimes our kids are in that, no, I'm mad. And so one of the things we have to do as adults is we have to first regulate ourselves. Like sometimes we got to put ourselves in check for a moment and say, do I need take a breath? And sometimes maybe even step away. Like, look, I need you to calm down. I need to calm down. Let's walk away for a minute and then come back to this. But then understand that sometimes that behavior, they're telling us they need something. And we've got to get down to that root cause. And so we've got to take ourselves out of it, not be upset. You know, Riley's dad obviously got upset when she told him to shut up, which are words we don't want our kids saying. But on the other side of it, we've got to know this isn't her norm. And so we can't react because that just amps up the situation. The other thing we've got to take into mind is sometimes we're out in society and we're out at the store or whatever when our child decides to have this outburst.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's just removing them or removing us from the situation. So sometimes taking a step. We're going to talk about this several times, but is the content versus process. So for content versus process, one of the things that we talk about is that this really could be a situation where we're like, wow, what they just said or did is really hurtful. It's really illogical. They're not making any sense. And we've got to get past like what they're saying and what they're doing to more of the process of really, let's get down to the root cause. Let's figure out what it is. And we want to understand so that we can also teach them a better way to react to that situation.
Right. And I do want to touch on just a little bit was, in the video, I believe Riley told her dad to like, shut up. And no, is that an appropriate response? Absolutely not, right? And we're not saying that those behaviors are okay and those responses are okay. But before we go in and we say, oh my gosh, don't say shut up or don't tell your dad to shut up or whatever it is, like we have to get back to that root cause, right? So at that time, that is not a time to be addressing what she said. It's let's get the feelings under control first. Let's figure out the root cause of those feelings. Like, is there a need? Like, does your child have a need? And what is causing that behavior? And so I think, there's almost like an order, right? Like whenever they have these big feelings and big emotions, there's an order in which we address them.
Right.
And we're not dismissing maybe the inappropriate things. I know as teachers, we've heard a lot of probably inappropriate things when kids get upset in our classrooms. But we're going to come back to that, right? But that time and place when their feelings are just so all over the place is not the time to discipline as well.
Right. Because remember what we were talking about at the way our brains work is in that moment they are in the lizard brain mode.
They're in that fight or flight.
And so at that point, they're not going to be logical.
No.
And we cannot have a logical conversation with that side of our brain. So what we've got to do is pick up on some tools of how to quickly switch their brain back over.
Absolutely.
And kind of do a reset, and then we can address the behavior. So one of the things is that to acknowledge the fact that our brains really do want to have a constant state. Most people really don't choose to live in chaos.
Right.
And so our kids aren't willingly doing this. They're not wanting to be disrespectful. They're not wanting to have these outbursts. But because they don't have the tools, this is how it shows us. So in other words, we've got to teach them the skills to activate that wizard brain a whole lot quicker to shorten those durations. So teaching kids to speak their feelings, sometimes giving something a name, allows it to quit having so much ownership over ourselves. So just saying, I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling frustrated, or I'm feeling scared. And this really does, research tells us over and over again, this allows our brain to kind of reset and move back into that wizard brain mode.
Yeah, and I have a little one at home, Jen, as you know, and the one thing he can't do quite yet, some things he can articulate, like, Mom, I need this, but he can't articulate how he's feeling, right? Well, the good thing about our GT kiddos is they can articulate that. They can say, hey, I'm sad, I'm upset, I'm tired, I'm hungry. And if you think about all the things really that make us upset as adults, probably upset our kids too, right?
Yeah.
When we get hungry,
Absolutely.
the term of hangry, we're
It's there
hungry,
for a
we're
reason.
angry,
Yeah.
it's there. And kids feel that too. And so I think articulating what their needs are can also help us get down to that root cause.
Yeah. And I think about that. I was giving an example just to Casey the other day. I don't know if you remember, but my sons are actually 23 years old.
Right.
And we talk a lot about emotional behavior anyway because they're both GT and they both have strong emotions, always have. And son was super frustrated at something not working the way he wanted it to. And he was just so angry. And I'm like, hold on a second.
Right.
Let's give the other person grace. Let's calm down. And then that reminder of like, I don't even know what happened. Tell me what happened. So just him talking through it, I could see kind of that relaxation. So even as adults, sometimes we need that reset. So we've got to give that grace to our kiddos too.
Absolutely.
I just know sometimes it would be a whole lot easier if there was a quick way to tell, which kind of leads me into a funny. One of my favorite shows is Big Bang Theory, and some of you may relate to that. But I want to give you an example and talk about that. Even though Big Bang Theory shows Sheldon is kind of way above the typical,
Yes.
but we also can kind of probably relate to some of the behaviors.
Absolutely.
So watch this video. I don't know if you'll see kind of what that wish too of what
Right.
he has with him. So let's check Sheldon out for just a minute.
Hey, Leonard, if you're happy and you know it, no need to clap your hands because I have an emotion detector. How's it working out? It's surprisingly well. Great, I'm happy for you. But hold on. What you are, aren't you sweet?
What's that? Are you working on your resume?
No, it's my brother's. I'm trying to help him get a job out here.
Ooh, that makes Leonard angry. No, it doesn't. Leonard, please. I know an angry face when I see it. It's this red frowny guy on my phone.
So that always, first of all, I'm a huge Big Bang fan, so that always just makes me chuckle. But, you know, unfortunately, at my stage in motherhood, we are clapping our hands if we're happy and we know it. But for our GT kiddos, we're way past that, right? And so we don't, unfortunately, have an emotion detector. And so,
Like we wish we could. Sometimes it would be
Absolutely.
wonderful if we did.
right, absolutely.
So, but because we don't have this wonderful machine, also it'd probably be pretty bulky to carry around, to be
Right.
honest, is we've got to set some realistic expectations of how do we get down to what it is, and how do we teach our kids that, no, you don't need a big machine. There are ways to kind of interpret this behavior.
Right.
So let's talk about some of those expectations. The first one is we really don't want you to think that this is magically going to get rid of these big feelings or whatever. The idea is just to minimize it and to provide our kids with the skills they need and how to operate those emotions and all the other things that they're dealing with of just being a kid.
Right.
The next one, Casey, if you'll tell us just a little bit about that.
So an outburst doesn't mean that your child has failed, right? All
Yeah.
kids, if kids are not experiencing emotions, that's a problem, right? And so emotions are not failure. They've not failed because they're having these emotions. And so I think that's really important as a parent. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves as to why they're having these feelings. And we just have to remember that your child isn't failing at anything. They're growing, they're maturing, they're learning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the other things we have to remember is that progress in this, it's not linear. It's not always going to be consistent. Like, it's a trial and error. I know with, I have twins, and now they're 23 years old, but I remember that what worked yesterday probably won't work today, and it's just trial and error and having conversations and learning your child's kind of trigger and what's the norm and what's not the norm and paying attention to those things. So understanding that where you are now is not going to be the way it is forever. So if you're super frustrated right now, understand that it can get better. But the other part of it is that sometimes when things are working really well and all of a sudden something comes out of the norm, you may have to shift direction.
Well, and two, you know, if you have two kiddos at home, you know, maybe you have two GT kiddos, it's not going to be the same. It's not like their behaviors are not going to be consistent. It's going to change from child to child. So just because one acts one way, and you probably know this having twin boys, it's not going to be the same.
No, and part of that is that we want to focus on the skills. So part of what you're talking about is everything's different. And so getting the kids to know what that looks like in themselves as well as others, so that they can really name it. And again, it helps them regulate once they're able to give it a name.
Right. Also, praise is much more powerful than punishment, right? So whenever we see our kiddos doing something great, we want to praise them. We want to recognize and identify those great things that is happening. And one thing to remember too is that if we are reinforcing a behavior, that's what's going to be repeated, right? So always remember what's reinforced is repeated. So we don't ever want to reinforce those negative behaviors or those negative emotions. And so the more that we can help our child identify what their emotions are, then we can praise them for identifying it. And then eventually we can reinforce those good behaviors because that's what they're going to repeat.
Right. That's such a good point. I think sometimes it's so much easier to react to the negative, but I think it just goes to this expectation of just understanding that we want you to know. As parents, we both understand because we've been in the midst of it. And so it is a lot of hard work, and you have to put forth the effort all the time. So it's almost like you always have to be on. We know that's not
Right.
realistic, but it's just setting that intentionality of sometimes taking that step back and requiring yourself to
Right.
kind of check in and then being able to model that back to your child.
Yeah, and I think a lot too. Parents are busy these days, Jen.
I know.
You know, we have lots of working parents, parents that stay at home with their babies. Everybody is just so busy. But if we don't take the time to be intentional about how we're addressing things at home, and you know, and it's hard to take that time out, but you just have to be able to stop in that moment, and that is kind of like resetting yourself as a parent to really deal with those emotions and those behaviors. So.
And that really goes along with the next expectation, Casey. One of the things that you were talking about is just taking the time to realize. And one of the things we cannot emphasize enough is pay attention to your child's triggers. Like, what is the environment like around them? Because sometimes it's certain people, places. I know for me, I get triggered by lots of crowds. It's very overstimulating. So really pay attention, because that environment and that trigger is so real for those kids. And we can help them, because sometimes they can't voice those words, but we can help them and say, you know what, I don't like crowds either, so let's step away from this.
Right.
And I think that's just important, really important to pay attention to.
And sometimes there's more than one impact there. So like it could be, you know, a place with a crowd, or it could be, you know, a feeling in a crowd, right? It's never an opportune time to have those big feelings. And it's up to us to help them learn how to regulate their emotions and to be able to advocate for themselves, right? Because, Jen, they're going to come to us, right? And they're going to be in school for, you know, well over a decade, and they have to be able to advocate no matter if they are 7 or if they are 13. They've got to be able to advocate for themselves and say, I am feeling very overwhelmed, or I am feeling really anxious about this, and be able to articulate what they're feeling to their teachers, to, you know, to their peers, right? And so I think that's really important to remember as well.
I think it's huge. I think really getting kids, especially the younger they can be, when they learn this, the easier it is for them just to be able to deal with the day in, day out struggle of, we know school can be hard, especially with our GT kids, that sometimes things are easy for them until they're not, and then that becomes a struggle, or understanding why they think differently than their peers. And so the sooner that we can teach those behaviors, the better. And understanding, and I know you guys have heard us say this over and over again, but getting down to the root cause to figure out, like, it's not about the behavior to fix the behavior. Like, if we just correct, like, I go back to Riley's dad, and Riley's dad was like, to your room. That didn't fix the behavior, that fixed the symptom.
Right.
But it didn't fix the behavior. So let's talk a little bit about that cause and effect. It's important to remember that beneath every behavior, there's a feeling.
Absolutely.
So like you were saying, the hangry, when all of a sudden your kid's acting just mad at the world and everything else, you got to think about, like, when's the last time you had something to eat? Do you need a snack?
Yes.
So, I mean, that's something, first of all, to think about. But along with the feeling, like we just said, there's a need.
They're hungry. They need that snack. They need whatever, like, they need nutrition, right? And like I said, I mean, I'm learning that with my little one. Like, there is a need somewhere. The behavior is there because of a need. And it's just getting them to articulate that. And then focus on meeting the need and not the behavior, right? So kind of going back to, we're not ignoring the behavior, and especially if it's in a negative connotation.
Right.
But let's meet the need first, because that's probably going to fix the behavior, and then we'll go back and address the things that need to be addressed, right?
Right. And I think that's important. We deal with the cause and then not the symptom. So when they're in the middle of melting down, we really have to think about what's different in this moment. What's different today that, and again, I go back to Riley of, like, this is outside of her norm. So even though she may have some outbursts every now and then, that's not the norm.
Right.
So what's different, finding out what's driving the behavior. And I think it's also very important what you said, Casey, is that we aren't really asking parents to excuse that behavior. There has to be consequences. So what we want to do is validate that it's okay to have feelings, and feelings can't be wrong or right.
Right.
I mean, I don't want people to tell me I can't feel a certain way as an adult.
Right.
So it's not okay for us to tell us that. But what we want to get our children to know is to be able to voice it, but then to also understand that you can have those feelings. It's
Right.
what you do and how you react to it that could be negative.
For sure.
So you're not okay to hurt someone with your words or with your actions. But we can't address that until we switch them back into that logical mind and that logical
Right.
thinking to be able to address the behavior. And so we're kind of coming to a close, but we want to just highlight, and we kind of have a funny way to look at that, or at least this is something I found amusing, but it's a great way to talk about why we need to address behaviors. So let's take a look real quick. So this is actually from a cartoon called Cat versus the Internet.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard about that, Casey.
I've not heard this one. Mm-mm.
All right, so it's kind of funny. You can see the guy here on the internet, and his cat is striving for a little bit of attention there. He's letting it known that he's in the room. However, this guy really doesn't look at. So I don't know if you notice the cat's like got his hand on the computer or his paw on the computer now.
Right.
So
I can relate to that because I have a cat at home, and if you don't acknowledge them, they're going to keep working at you.
Right. So think about this as, I know the cat's funny, but you think about your kids and all the different ways they try to get attention. And so now he's like climbing on the guy's head, right? I don't know if you've ever had that. I remember as a classroom teacher, sometimes that tug on the bottom of your shirt. Miss.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think about that as a parent too. I remember, you know, my kid, no matter where they were in the house, I could hear, Mom.
Yes.
And, you know, if we don't respond, so he's still not getting the response he wants. So this time it's even a bigger action, right? The sad part is sometimes we're like this guy. I mean, and like you said, our lives are busy. We've got work to do. We've got things.
Absolutely.
And it's not necessarily saying if you're doing this, that this is bad. This is normal. But obviously, I don't know if you can tell in that little picture there, Casey, but that cat's a little, he's done.
His arms are crossed.
Yeah. So again, that's kind of some signals of the behavior. Oh, you know, we could look at our kid and be like, I see your arms are crossed and you're making noises. Are you angry?
Yeah.
You know, but of course, that takes a lot of work for us as well to step back. And he's had it. He's leaving the room. Sometimes this happens and we think, okay, well, it's over with, right?
Right.
Not really.
Right.
Because then now we hear, you know, cats are notorious for scratching things up, right?
Yes.
So he didn't get our attention, so he's doing something crazy in the background, right?
Right.
Well, let's check this out.
Oh. Yep.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny, but really, the next time this cat wants this guy's attention, what do you think the first thing he's going to go to was?
Oh, he's going to go scratch and
he's going to go scratch
call it
because that's the
something.
first reaction he got, right?
Right.
And sometimes that happens with our kids is they try all these different ways, or they're just trying to work through it. Like this cat's really trying to work through his emotions. What his need was then was attention, right?
Right.
This is just one example, but you know, he wasn't getting what he needed, and so he acted out. So the next time he wants attention, instead of going through all those steps, he's going to go immediately
right to the behavior.
Yep,
absolutely.
And so that just reinforces kind of the wrong thing.
Right.
But if we could get from the early stage of recognizing that trigger spot of, oh, maybe I need to look and check. And
the phrase of what's recognized is reinforced. And this gentleman or this guy in this comic, he recognized the scratching, right? And so then that is what the cat's going to go back to, and he's going to keep scratching and scratching.
Absolutely. And so kind of a funny way to look at it, but hopefully it kind of makes you think a little bit. I know we've covered a lot of information. That's when we're breaking this down into multiple parts. But hopefully this will help you start thinking at least initially about what's the root cause and maybe do I need to remove my child from the situation or give them just a language to switch back into that logical brain.
Yeah, and hopefully this just is really, hopefully this has educated you on how a GT child's brain works and maybe why they're having those behaviors as far as the cognition part of it and what's going on in their heads. And we're really looking forward to the next couple parts of our series. We hope that you will join in with us to just keep working towards that social emotional behavior and how to deal with that at home. So thank you so much for joining GT with Jen and Casey today. We loved having you, and we hope that you had some great takeaways.
And just remember, we're here as a support system.
Absolutely.
And so you're welcome to call our department or look at our website. Again, my name is Jennifer Williams, and this is Casey Higdon. feel free to reach out, and we look forward to more time with you.